The comments heard on The View from a Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now here is today's The View from a Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View from a Pew.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Mac McKoy, and thanks for listening to The View from a Pew. Now, no matter what pod site you are a subscriber to, you just search for The View from a Pew, and all of these programs will be there for you. Also, we are right now, live on some social media, and we are live on YouTube. The video part of the video and the audio, which is called a webcast, are available on YouTube and on social media. All right. So my guest host today is Pastor Delmar Austin, and we're answering the question, or at least trying to, what does the Bible say about what happens when you die?
We're talking about the realm of the dead, and you know, Mac, there is great fascination with this that goes on. We see it at Halloween time, but we see it a lot. I was reading about the paranormal this week and getting ready. Paranormal is the term that's used for anything that we really don't have a good scientific answer for. And it includes things like UFOs, extrasensory perception, telekinesis, ghosts, and then a whole line of other things that take place after that. According to polls, how many people do you think in the United States believe in ghosts?
Oh, I would say half.
Well, almost half. According to what I read, about 40 to 45% of people really do believe in ghosts. Maybe that's why Halloween is so interesting for most people.
But there isn't such a thing.
Well, let's talk about what the Bible says that maybe can help us explain this whole thing better. I'm going to go to Paul again in Ephesians 6 and verse 12. And here's what Paul says, is he's talking about living the Christian life and trying to go through all the struggles that we do as Christians. He says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, that's human beings, right?
Right.
But against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. What is Paul talking about there?
Well, fallen angels and demons.
I believe so. And that's what fallen angels are. They were originally cast out of heaven and then became demons here on this earth.
So a fallen angel and a demon are the same thing.
Yes.
But the operative word is fallen.
That's right, because they were cast out of heaven because they rebelled against God in the same way that Lucifer did. And Paul is saying that's the biggest struggle that we have. Not just human being against human being, it is against the influence, the satanic influence, and the deception that is caused by Satan and his demons in this world.
What about those people who believe they've been visited by someone who has, in this world, died or passed on?
Well, we're going to deal with that.
Okay.
And as we get towards the end here and throughout the sections ahead. But let me go back to the Old Testament and take a look at people who were affected by the unseen. Okay? Were affected in a very bad way. In the Old Testament, there's a story of King Saul, right? Yep. King Saul is chosen to be the next king. He is trying to serve God, but he is tempted many times to do things his own way. And when he does that, we see that he becomes depressed. We see that he becomes violent. And the Bible even says that a spirit, and what they mean there is an evil spirit, is affecting him. He's becoming under demonic control. Okay. You remember the time that David is playing his harp, he's in the court there, and Saul gets so angry because he's jealous of David. David does things so much better than him. He takes his sword, his lance, he throws it at David and almost kills him. But David escapes and gets away. It's an evil spirit that continues to haunt Saul. So it's in the Old Testament, it's mentioned. That's just one story, but it shows that in the Old Testament times, the effect of demons was real. In the time of Jesus, there are many stories about demons and demon possession. Do you remember the story of the man that Jesus meets at the graveyard?
Calls himself Legion.
Yeah, well, the voice comes out and says, I am Legion,
Yeah.
right? Comes out of the man. Jesus recognizes that he's demon possessed.
Well, and didn't he recognize Jesus?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not really him so much as the demons.
Okay.
The demons recognize that this is the Son of God. And they say, leave us alone. We don't want anything to do with you. And then they say, can you cast us out and let us go and bother these pigs? And Jesus does. He allows them to. And they run this herd of pigs off the cliff and destroy. Demon control is usually connected with violence. And here's the story of when Jesus casts out the demons, what happens. But Jesus does this several times in the lives of different people. Jesus is confronting all the demons that have had control and influence in people's lives as he goes from place to place, right?
Yep.
These are real. The Bible shows that these are real things that take place. And that's why Paul says this is what we struggle against. In the New Testament, at the time of the early church, Paul is followed by a slave girl who is demon-possessed. She's a fortune teller. She's telling people their fortunes, but she's controlled by the spirit of a demon. Paul casts the demon out, and the people that owned her, she was a slave, people that owned her were very upset because now they couldn't make money from her anymore, and she was useless to them. But here are the stories that show all the way through the Bible that there are powers that are out there, and these powers are trying to deceive us and turn us away from God. Mac, these are the powers that we struggle against. And these are the powers that have engendered in people's minds the idea of ghosts that are out there.
Okay.
Are these powers the souls of dead people who are coming out to haunt and scare us? Or are these demons? You know what? The Bible doesn't talk about people that have died that come back and try to talk to us and try to influence our lives. What the Bible does talk about are demons and the control that they want over our lives.
My guest host today is Pastor Delmar Austin. I'm Mac McKoy, and you're listening to The View from a Pew. And this is our segment is what does the Bible say about what happens to us when we die?
Let me give you some Bible text about how the Bible talks about this, because the Bible's trying to give us warnings to stay away from anyone who says they can communicate with the dead, or stay away from anything that has to do with the dark side. Okay? Notice what, back in Old Testament times in Leviticus, the part of the law of God that's given is, give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. This is back in the time of Israel, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31. There's Leviticus 20:27. It says, a man or woman who is a medium, that's somebody who tries to communicate with the dead, or who has familiar spirits, shall surely be put to death. I mean, this was serious stuff. Don't mess around with this kind of activity. And then over in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 through 12, when you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abomination of these nations. Okay? Those who, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire. That was about child sacrifice. Let me just continue this. Through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. Okay, God makes it really clear here. Don't get involved in this kind of stuff. It is wrong, and it will take you down the wrong path. Is because God's trying to hide something good from us? No, it never is. Because God knows the dangers and says, stay away from this sort of thing.
Let me ask you a question, if I may. I want to go back to the Leviticus 19 and 27. You said if you mess with these demons, you will surely die. Is that an in death, or is that a human death and Jesus can save you?
There was a death penalty that was involved with that.
Okay.
And God was telling them, don't get involved in this, or you're gonna be put to death.
Okay.
There was
going to heaven.
Well, there was a requirement that they didn't do this. You know, when it comes down to who's going to go to heaven, I always leave that in the hands of God. Okay,
Yeah,
God can make
my pay grade
can make those decisions. But they were going to be stoned if they messed around in this area because of the dangers and the deception. There is demonic deception, and the Bible talks about it an awful lot. Talks about it in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament. And what God is saying is showing us that this is an area that we shouldn't have anything to do with. Why, if this was the case, that we were only talking with dead relatives, we were just checking to see how grandma was up there in heaven, God wouldn't want to stop that, would he? You know, just to have a little communication with grandma and see what, no. Because this is not talking to dead relatives. This is talking to demons. This is trying to get in connection with demons. And God said, I don't want you to do this sort of thing.
Couldn't it also be an angel, a messenger that grandma has sent or God has sent to tell them what grandma's thinking or talking or seeing?
Yeah, well, the Bible also makes it very clear that Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light.
Yeah.
That's in 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very aware of the deceptions that Satan has. And if you have this idea, remember, Israel is surrounded by all these different nations, all these cultures who believe that, yeah, after you die, you don't really die. So why not communicate the dead and talk with the dead? It was Satan's way of deceiving people and get them to listen to him so that they would follow him instead of following God.
Okay.
God told us this truth so we wouldn't be deceived by the devil.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a touchy subject.
Okay.
When Halloween rolls around, many churches will have an event called Trunk or Treat. And it's where people raise their trunks and put candy and goods in there. Little kids come out dressed in their costumes, and they're given candy and treats. By what I hear you saying today, that isn't something we should be doing.
I'm not going to condemn all sorts of children activities that has to do with collecting candy and enjoying a little extra sweets on that night.
Okay.
What I am going to condemn is the idea that is not a biblical idea, that when people die, they don't really die, and that we can connect with them, we can communicate with them. And some of this Halloween celebration is really tied with that idea.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. It's not in the Bible. It's where we have exchanged the truth of God for a lie.
All right, so how do we wrap this up then? What happens to us when we die? Talk to me like I'm an 8-year-old.
Well, we're going to go next time, Mac. We're going to go into the Old Testament first.
Right.
And we're going to look at a lot more other texts that have to do with what happens when you die. We're going to look specifically at what soul sleep is about. Then we're going to go into the New Testament, because the New Testament has a lot of information too. And you know what the focus of the New Testament is, particularly in the Pauline letters? The focus is on the resurrection.
Right.
That's why we can live through these times when we're under persecution, when we're being put to death, when we're dying on crosses just like Jesus, as some of the apostles were. That's why we can live through these hard times, because there's hope of the resurrection.
If you have comments or questions for Pastor Austin, you can email them to me, Mac, M-A-C, like macaroni, at The View from a Pew, and we'll do our best to answer those the next time we're on with Delmar. I'm Mac McKoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Right here on The View from a Pew. And thanks for listening.